So I wasn't planning on doing a video today. I wanted to take today off because we have stuff to do today, and Saturday was like my 10-year anniversary here on YouTube. You can watch the video about that up here. But there was so much news this weekend that I had to cover it. So let's dive into this special edition of Linux Gaming News. The first thing I want to talk about is the fact that Valve has just launched a collaboration with Arch Linux. Now, if you're not familiar, Valve runs Steam. You probably know that. But you might not know that SteamOS, which is what the Steam Deck runs on, is based on Arch Linux. Arch Linux is one of the more interesting Linux distributions out there because it, unlike most other Linux distros, is built from like the ground up, and any distro based on Arch Linux can be anything. Arch is more of a framework for a Linux distribution, so it's pretty neat. And you've probably heard someone say, by the way, I use Arch as a meme. Well, the reason that people say, by the way, I use Arch is because if they're using just straight up Arch Linux, then they put their computer together. They put their system together from the ground up. And that's one of the reasons that Valve uses Arch Linux, is because it's so customizable to be just a really great framework for releasing a distribution. Now, there are other reasons that one might use an Arch-based Linux distro, but what's really exciting today is the fact that Valve has partnered with the Arch Linux development team to invest in the projects inside of Arch that will help make SteamOS and other Linux distributions based on Arch better. So let's talk about this. Now, I don't know how to say your name, and I'm really sorry for that, but Levent Polyak, I apologize that I butchered your name. It's my best attempt, and I'm going to stop trying right there. Said in the Arch Linux mailing list, quote, "We're excited to announce that Arch Linux is entering into a direct collaboration with Valve. Valve is generously providing backing for two critical projects that will have a huge impact on our distribution: a build service infrastructure and a secure signing enclave. By supporting work on a freelance basis for these topics, Valve enables us to work on them without being limited solely by the free time of our volunteers. This opportunity allows us to address some of the biggest outstanding challenges we have been facing for a while. This collaboration will speed up the progress that would otherwise have taken us much longer to achieve, and will ultimately unblock us from finally pursuing some of our planned endeavors. We're incredibly grateful for Valve to make this possible and for their explicit commitment to help and support Arch Linux." Now, there are going to be people who are skeptical of this. I have already seen a few comments. People are going to say, oh, they're going to corrupt Arch Linux, but I really don't think that that's going to be the case. Quote, "These projects will follow our usual development and consensus building workflows. RFCs will be created for any wide-ranging changes. Discussions on this mailing list, as well as issue, milestone, and epic planning in our GitLab, will provide transparency and insight into the work. We believe this collaboration will greatly benefit Arch Linux and are looking forward to share further development on this mailing list as work progresses." That is super, super neat. Now, what does that actually mean? First of all, it means that Valve is providing money for anyone who wants to work on either of these two projects, namely building service infrastructure and a secure signing enclave. But what do those two things mean? Service infrastructure, I'm not sure. It could be website development. It could be like packages, like package distribution and stuff like that. I don't know. There was some speculation that a secure signing enclave could be a way of like enabling more secure anti-cheat. But if we go to Gaming on Linux, and Liam was the one who I saw make this kind of speculation. They actually responded here. Campbell Jones from Valve, who is also an Arch Linux packager, said, "The enclave is essentially intended to be a way for us to PGP sign packages with a single signing key instead of how we do it right now, which is one personal key per packager. It will not benefit Proton or the anti-cheat situation in any way and is completely unrelated." Essentially, it means that Arch Linux is going to have some kind of portal or some other way of like having a single PGP key that signs all packages and therefore is like a root authority of trust versus how it is right now, where it's kind of like whoever packaged it has to have their own signing key, and it has to be part of the approved list of signing keys, I'm assuming. Yeah, so this is interesting, and this is going to be a better way of handling security, the security of packages on Arch Linux, because right now it's kind of a Wild West. It's great to see Valve putting their money where their mouth is again. This is yet another project that Valve is supporting, another open source project. Valve has put a lot of money into the open source software that they depend on for SteamOS and some of the other stuff that they're working on. And so, Proton, for example. And Valve either directly employs people who work on these projects, or they provide money to pay freelancers who work for those projects. It's really cool to see. I mean, there are few companies on this earth that invested this much money and done so with no strings attached like Valve. I mean, there are other companies. I mean, Microsoft contributes a lot to open source, but Valve does it in a different way, in a way that I don't think I've seen other like companies that benefit from proprietary code as much as Valve does. So I don't know. This is very, very cool. I am very excited. You love to see this kind of stuff, and it seems like Valve has really kind of put a lot of money into developing their own infrastructure based on open source code. So great to see. Now, let me ask you a question. Are you enjoying these videos? Do you believe in the work that I'm doing here? Why not like that smash button? It's the best way to tell YouTube you want to see more videos just like this. You can also get subscribed if that's more your speed. You can watch my news videos every Monday and Friday. And I'm going to have other kind of cool stuff going on here. Now, I recently announced that I'm no longer doing brand integrations. I'm no longer doing sponsorships on this channel. And that's because, it's the right thing to do. But that's going to be a big loss of income for the work that I'm doing here. So if you like the work that I'm doing, if you watch these videos regularly and you can afford it, maybe make a pledge over on Patreon or a channel member. There's links down below. With all that said, thank you for watching these videos, and let's get back to the news. Next up, another piece of Valve news, the updated Steam subscriber agreement. Now, I've seen a lot of confusion about this on the subreddit. People were like, I have to take Valve to court now? No. This is good. This is good news. Now, if you're not familiar, if you live in the EU or something, you might not be aware of this, but in the United States, there are these things called arbitration clauses, which basically means that Valve or whichever company, gets to pick the person who acts sort of like a judge, and they get to take you to private court. And your chances of winning in arbitration are essentially zero. So arbitration is bad news. It's anti-customer, and it's just evil. It's also extremely common. I mean, no matter what EULA you sign, there's going to be an arbitration clause in it. And this updated Steam subscriber agreement eliminates that clause, which is interesting. This is a win, I think, for everybody. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm only going on my understanding of these things. This is pretty cool. Let's read what they say. We'd like to share some information about recent updates to the Steam subscriber agreement, which mainly relate to how any dispute between Valve and Steam users are resolved. We have eliminated the requirement that disputes be resolved by individual arbitration. As always, we encourage you to contact Steam support when you have any issues, as that will nearly always be the best way to reach a solution. But if that doesn't work, the updated SSA now provides that any disputes are to go forward in court instead of arbitration. We've also removed the class action waiver, as well as the cost and fee shifting provisions that were in prior versions of the SSA. For many of our customers, including the ones living in the EU and UK, Australia, New Zealand, and Quebec, these updates have limited impact as the arbitration rules didn't apply to them even before the update. This is just an overview, and we encourage you to review the entire updated SSAs. You can review it here. Now, this seems like a good thing. So if we go in here and we diff the old and the new ones here, there are going to be a bunch of different changes, but I'm going to try to cut through most of them as well as as fast as I can here. So if we just kind of scroll past the links here, we should be able to find where the actual content is. They added a Polish translation, which is kind of cool. But we can see that there's two big changes here in the table of contents. There's applicable law and jurisdiction and miscellaneous, but you can see over here they have applicable law, mediation, jurisdiction, attorney's fees, and then number 11 is dispute resolution, binding arbitration, class action waiver, and then number 12 is miscellaneous. So they've just completely removed section 11, and they have changed applicable laws and jurisdictions. So let's scroll down and see what else. Now, we have the new one on the right, the old one on the left. Let's scroll down here, and we're going to... I reformatted the document here, so it should be a little easier to read now. So this is the same. That's been removed. And then really it looks like the entire... most of the rest of the content of the SSA is the same. And then if we scroll down here, it's just a change in the language here that allows for class action lawsuits and for you to actually be able to sue Valve, which is pretty cool. It's cool of Valve, and it's kind of within the image that they curate of themselves to get rid of binding arbitration clauses, because Valve likes to really market themselves as pro-customer, and that this is a good move as far as I understand it. This is good for anybody, because like I said, most of the time if you have to go into arbitration, you're going in at a much higher disadvantage. There's no, like, it's not public, right? And most of the time you're gonna have to sign an NDA too, and you're gonna end up with not being able to plead your case, or if you do, the arbitrator is going to be heavily biased, because it's not picked by you; they're paid by the company. And also Valve isn't the only one who does this. Every major like online service does this kind of stuff. So it's cool to see Valve moving away from this. So was it worth it to diff the two files? I think so, because sometimes, and I'm not saying Valve would do this, but there's a lot of companies that would be like, we've changed our subscriber agreement to be better for you, and here's like the highlights, and then they will sneak in something in the middle that like is actually quite draconian and bad. Hello, Adobe. But yeah, no, I like this. This is a good thing. But I was curious as to why that they actually did this, so I went and tried to find an answer. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be a lot of insight on this. So Polygon reports on this. Millions of Steam users woke up this morning with a notice from Valve. The multifaceted gaming company updated its Steam subscriber agreement to remove a requirement that disputes go to arbitration as opposed to court. Now, if you have a dispute, you're required to take the company to federal or state court in King County, Washington. Legal experts consider this a win for Steam users, even if most of them will likely never take Valve to court. Consumers are usually required in such agreements to arbitrate and not to sue, at least in the United States. And they did have that arbitration clause. But if you scroll down here, so why would Valve do this? It may be a response to several law firms' attempt to file mass arbitrations, wherein hundreds or thousands of consumers bringing individual arbitration claims against the same company at the same time and over the same issue, according to classaction.org. It's essentially a loophole for class action waivers and arbitration clauses, though it still won't end up in court. Classaction.org, a class action watchdog website, called it a relatively new way to take on corporations for consumer disputes. Several law firms have pursued this option, one of which was sued by Valve for allegedly attempting to extort the company with a threat of mass arbitrations with more than 50,000 people. Now, why would that be important? Because if you most arbitration comes with fees, which are less expensive than traditional lawsuits, but they can still be up to like $1,500 per claim. So if 50,000 people filed arbitration claims against Valve and they had to pay $1,500 per person, that's like $75 million that Valve would have to pay in arbitration fees. So yeah, that would be bad news. I wouldn't want to pay $75 million. Anyway, Valve hasn't actually explained why they made this change, but it's still interesting to see nonetheless. And honestly, I'd like to see more companies do this because private law enforcement is bad, and forced arbitration is evil in my book. Next up, this is interesting. I'm very excited about this. A new California law means digital stores can't imply you're buying a game when you're merely licensing it. This is truly awesome because I have complained about this for ages and ages. This bill in California, named AB 2426, was signed into law by Gavin Newsom on Tuesday, and basically it means that if you buy an ebook, if you buy a game, if you buy a movie on Amazon or any of these other digital storefronts, and you don't actually own that copy, you can't take it offline and use it without restrictions, then the company that sold it to you can't actually call it a sale. They have to call it a license or a rental or something like that. And they have to put in bold text somewhere that you don't actually own it. This is huge because companies like Amazon are getting away with it, but even Valve is getting away with it on Steam. Like, in a lot of cases, you don't own the game that you buy on Steam because you can't use it offline, or you can't use it offline without going offline on Steam first. And I think that this could have profound implications for digital storefronts going forward. So let's read this article here. A new California bill, AB 2426, signed into law by Gavin Newsom on Tuesday, is an attempt to bring transparency to the buying and selling of digital goods like movies, ebooks, and yes, video games. California Assemblymember Jackie Irwin introduced the bill in part after hearing about Ubisoft's move with The Crew. If you don't remember that, that was the whole situation. The law won't change the fact that we're all licensing games instead of actually owning them, but it will force companies that operate in California to be more transparent about it. Companies and storefronts that would have to comply include Microsoft with the Microsoft Store, Valve with Steam, Sony with the PlayStation Store, Nintendo with its eShop, and publishers with their own stores like Ubisoft Store. The law is expected to go into effect January 1st, 2025, preventing companies that operate digital storefronts from using words like purchase or buy unless the company is clear that it's selling a license, not unrestricted ownership interest in the digital good. This makes me so happy. This notice will have to be distinct and separate from other terms and conditions of the purchase according to the text. The law does not apply to subscription-based services, free downloads like demos, or companies that offer permanent offline downloads of digital goods. Companies will be fined for breaking that rule. Now, this could be awesome, and I think Valve has an opportunity here to stand out against the rest of the crowd as well, because it is entirely possible to distribute games through Steam and have them work offline. I mean, you can technically distribute DRM-free games through Steam. The question is, will Valve differentiate that? Will they actually put it on their on store pages and say, hey, this game, you actually buy this game because you own, what did they say? Unrestricted ownership interest in the digital good. That would be cool to see. And then some games that require you to be signed into Steam to play, it's not a purchase anymore. That's a different button. I would love to see that, and it seems like it would be something Valve would do too. So, I don't know. I absolutely love this. I'd like to see this become a national thing, honestly. And it'll be cool to see how these companies react to this, right? By sending AB 2426 to Governor Newsom, California is now the first state to recognize that when digital media retailers use terms like buy and purchase to advertise digital media licenses, they are engaged in false advertising. University of Michigan professor Aaron Perzanowski said in a news release from Irwin. Consumers around the world deserve to understand that when they spend money on digital movies, music, books, and games, those so-called purchases can disappear without notice. There is still important work to do in securing consumers' digital rights, but AB 2426 is a crucial step in the right direction. Gotta love it. You gotta love it. Now I do have a few questions about this, because if you buy a game, if you buy one of those like hybrid games for the Switch where it's like, you get the physical cartridge, but you have to have like the day one download in order to play it. Can that be considered a sale according to this law? Because I don't think it should be considered a sale. If you don't have, controlling interest in the thing you're buying, do you even own it, right? Ownership interest, right? That's what the term they used. So if you buy something physical and they can take that away from you, I think this law could go further, honestly. And I'd like to see something even stronger come across the desk of like California or even the U.S. federal government. I'd love to see something like that. But I'd love to know your thoughts on any of these stories that we talked about today. Well, I think that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, maybe check out my 10-year anniversary video here. Very crazy that I've been doing this for over a decade at this point.